once you have gained momentum, that's not the end, because cultivation begins to bite. That's when the real challenge occurs. This is where the next obstacle we should pay attention to, because it could really obstruct us. Just like a wave crashing onto your little boat, you have overcome the waves at the shore. You think it's all smooth sailing, but next the tsunami comes and wipe out your little boat. And that's what most people will encounter. So the initial obstruction is easy to overcome, but the next is very difficult to overcome. And what is that? So this is usually what happens. When we start to practice, at the initial period, it's very smooth and everything that we do is very successful. So we come to like a meditation class and everything goes quite well and we're making progress. But then after 4 months or 6 months or years, and some people even 5 years, this obstruction doesn't surface until decades later. So that's how scary it is. It depends on how deep you want to dig. And then all of a sudden, things seem to go wrong. They can't meditate anymore. They have a lot of disturbing thoughts. They cannot sit very well, and they become quite upset. There may be life events that start to take toll on their practice. Work, family start to tear them emotionally or spiritually apart. They start to feel overwhelmed. They start to feel like they're losing control. That's when our cultivation begins to bite. So meditation is beginning to produce effects. We aren't just going to this meditation class where you float along quite happily, happy-go-lucky. Our practice at this point is no longer a hobby. It's beginning to take serious effect. But it starts to percolate through the mind. That's beginning to sink into our subconsciousness. And it will have this upheaval effect. During this whole time, it will start to disturb us. But usually, if we stick with it and persist and don't force things too much, but continue with the rhythm, knowing that we are facing obstructions, after a while, we usually reestablish our meditation. We recover. So this is very important to know. If we don't understand this, we don't know what we're going through, we can give up because we think that this is the end of our practice and it's not worth pursuing. And in some cases, on a better and more positive level, when we recover, you learned and you survive and you become even more positive. And you may have also sorted a few personal problems out as well. So you have resolved not only your own personal problems, but maybe problems with others as well. You're on better ground than before. So there can be a bigger and sometimes even more dramatic upheaval after a couple of years or even a decade. And quite often, people stop meditating at that point. They stop practicing. That seems to be a quite critical period. So this is something that we should pay attention to our own progress and realize that we're going through a challenge and that we should not give up, because once we have overcome that, we know that we will be on better grounds. If you can get through that, you're probably in it for good. Because once you have experienced that, you know how it is. You know that challenges can no longer fool you. Sometimes your meditation is going quite well, you're experiencing positively, and then for some reasons you don't want to continue. So at this point, you just need to gently persist and don't give up. Let's say you meditate for like what we did for half an hour, or even if you can't come here, but if you can just put in the effort to at least make the effort to come here, for example, then you have overcome that resistance, that obstructions. So you are building the momentum. You are no longer accepting defeat. Essentially, you're telling yourself, no, I'm going to make my own decision to be where I want to be, and not of my emotional holdback that is taking me back, but I've decided to make a decision to move on, right? That's essentially, that's what you're telling yourself every time you overcome obstruction. But if you feel like you're losing interest and without any motivation to continue, then you should go back to do what you enjoyed before. Perhaps go listen to your favorite music or eat your favorite food, something that will reignite that passion, right? That interest again, that motivation. So you go back to that. This may be worldly attachment, but there is a difference this time. Before that we study Buddhism, we enjoy those things because of the illusion to satisfy our cravings. But now, after we have studied Buddhism, we are enjoying those things to reignite that passion, right? To give us that motivation to continue the journey. So we know that we may be still weak and we cannot leave the worldly enjoyments behind yet. But you do something that will allow you to overcome the obstructions. Like, for example, music. You can listen to music without lyrics that stir your negative emotions, for example. Just listen to the beat, listen to the melody to give you that excitement again. Fighting our cravings is not easy, and it can be very tiring. That's why there are reactions. And the practitioner could become annoyed by the fight. So why is there such reaction? What is happening? One reason is that the whole system, our whole being, is beginning to feel threatened. We've been chugging along in life all this time. We want to change course. Of course it's going to resist. Our subconsciousness that we've been building is going to resist that change. His whole being, as it were, is beginning to think. He's taking it this seriously. He's no longer attending meditation classes just to feel positive, but he's taking this seriously. He wants to be transcendental. He wants to be enlightened. So that's what our whole being is taking resistance. So it's no longer just a pleasant and comfortable sit where you float along quite happily and then go back to your pig trough, as it were. But it's beginning to bite. It's beginning to take hold, and you're beginning to be changed. That's what's happening. So of course, there's a sharp reaction from that part of you, which is not yet involved. It's reacting to that change.